5:37, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Ethics Commission. Here it's February 10th, 5:37 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order and we'll do roll call. Ms. Sigfredo Perez is recused from this meeting. Adriana Alexander will not be able to join us today. We have Boyer Ornelas.
Here.
Present. Mr. Saba Zapata.
Present.
Mr. Catu, I'm sorry to interrupt. They were telling me that there's no audio on the live stream for the ethics meeting right now on the streaming. I just got a text from Commissioner Cigarroa.
Okay. Should we hold off until that streaming is available, or?
She's just saying it's available, but no audio.
We can try and call public access channel. That's actually something through public access channel. Let me check on that real quick.
Well, it's noted, and we can continue with the roll call. We've got Jean Belmares, who's present.
Present.
And Adolfo Martinez.
Present.
And myself, Vidal Cantu, present. So we do have a quorum. We'll begin business once we get the okay from public access.
Is in direct violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Let's go back to the June 19th meeting, 2020. You all have the posted agenda item, and the only section that was supposed to be discussed was 211. Not 201, not 209. That is what was posted. Now, I went to the Texas Open Meeting Act, section 551.041, number B. It states, the notice shall be sufficient to apprise the general public of the subjects to be considered during the meeting. The only thing that you all were supposed to consider was 211, not 201, 209. The next page down there in the middle, the Code of Ethics. So copies will be given to be training, will be conducted to the city folks, but nothing will be distributed, copies or training session to every person doing business with Laredo. So how can Blue Cross Blue Shield be, how can Blue Cross Blue Shield be responsible for what their agent, Laurel Insurance, did not do? And where was the legal department for not asking for this? Second, let's look at the Board of Commissions for the Ethics Commission. Down on the bottom, it's in the middle, it states that a commissioner, no member of the commission shall serve more than 3 full terms. Go down to District 8, Elsa Gavan was termed out in 2020. And according to the holdover clause, there is no holdover clause on this. That is only reserved for the Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning, and the Municipal Civil Service Commission. This does not have a holdover clause. So that is the second violation that was done. And if you go to the minutes, the last page, you can read the minutes. Nowhere was 211 ever discussed. Nowhere at all. So I'm asking you all to suspend this meeting and ask your lawyers if y'all can proceed, because the June 19th, 2020 meeting was in direct violation of the Texas Opens Meeting Act. Now, Mr. Patino, he's a very intelligent man, but all those motions that he made are invalid. And to me, in my opinion, he had an attorney write them so Dr. Martinez could get off the hook. Mr. Martinez is not off the hook because that meeting violated the Texas Open Meetings Act.
That's 3 minutes, Mr. Chairman. That's 3 minutes already.
Okay.
Okay, I got one more comment.
Well, we'll
There's
give you
3
the-
members up here that are biased. Mr. Cantu, Mr. Zapata, and Ms. Alexander. They can't hear this meeting. Also, Dr. Martinez and Mr. Pettis won't be able to hear it. So you have 5 members that are out. And the other thing I can see is that the city manager cannot appoint an ad hoc committee because he has a direct conflict of interest being doctor-patient relation with Dr. Martinez. I thank you for your time. I wish you all to discuss this and have lawyers look at this before you all go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herford. Thank you very much, Mr. Herford. We appreciate that. Okay. Let's go ahead and proceed with the approval of the minutes first. And then we can discuss this with Mr. Benavides and Ms. Reese to see where we stand on going forward on this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Let's call for the approval first of the minutes of October 14th, 2020.
So move.
Okay, is there a second?
I second that, Adolfo Martinez.
Okay, so it's been moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. The minutes for the meeting on November 17th. Have you all had a chance to review them? Is there any changes that need to be done?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Anybody give me a second, please?
Second.
Okay. Moved in second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. At this time, I think it would be a good idea to maybe review what has been brought to light to make sure that we are in compliance with this meeting. So I'd like to see if we could go into, if we have any members that would like to motion to go into executive session so we can discuss this with the attorneys.
Move.
Second.
Okay, second. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. It's 5:48 and we'll now go into executive session. All right, I think we're all back now.
Everybody back?
Yes. All right, it's 5:59 and we're back in regular session. Mr. Benavides, can you please advise us how to proceed?
Yes. And so what I wanted to say is there's no need to go into executive session in this particular instance. There was a public comment, which is not necessarily an item that's on the agenda. You guys can legally proceed and move on with the items on the agenda.
Perfect. Okay, well, with that being said, then we'll go ahead and continue with item number 4A, which is a presentation of supplemental ethics reports and findings by outside legal counsel acting in capacity as the ethics compliance officer in response to the motion made by the Ethics Commission back on June 19th, 2020, for the investigation of potential ethics violations by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas or any other parties in regards to possible violations of the Ethics Code, to include possible violations in Section 4.01 and 4.02 and any other matter incident thereto. So what are the findings by outside counsel regarding this?
Good evening. Yes, sir. I went ahead and prepared a report that was provided to you with those findings. And for today's presentation, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I think hopefully summarizes it and simplifies it a little bit. The report was about 16 pages, so I'm hoping that this will narrow it a little bit. And I also have some exhibits that I think are important for the commission to consider that go into some of those findings. So if I could, I hope I can share a screen. I don't know
I
if
hope so.
they can let me, I don't know if IT can allow me to do that.
IT, can we help Mr. Tamés with this?
Yes, just a second. Do you have would you like to share your screen, Mr. Tamés? I think you are able to, you have access.
It says that it's disabled by the host. Okay. So can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm gonna not run it because I need to kind of break out of the PowerPoint presentation to the exhibits that I want to show you. And they're not as legible when I copy and paste them into the PowerPoint presentation. So bear with me as we kind of go navigate between PowerPoint and the exhibits as they come up. So as the introductory matter, you will recall that back on June 19th, 2020, we had the presentation regarding the Section 2.11 report that was filed by Mayor Pete Sines, Councilwoman Nelly Vilma, and Councilmember George Algelt. At the end of the meeting, we had two rulings that required further investigation. Ruling number 2 was whether there was sufficient evidence that Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas violated Section 0.402 of the Ethics Code by not disclosing any conflict of interest with Council Member Martinez. Prior to the June 10th, 2019 meeting, in which the City Council considered the health insurance contracts that Blue Cross and Blue Shield was presenting. Ruling number 3 was who or what parties disclosed Council Member Martinez's alleged violations to the public. And the commission will recall that there was some discussion that the public was aware about the disclosure that there might be a conflict of interest before the commission was presented with that report. And so that was a concern that was voiced by the commission at that time. So that was ruling number 3. And these 2 rulings were what the commission asked me to look into. So I'd like to go into a summary of those findings. With regard to ruling number 2 was whether or not Blue Cross and Blue Shield violated Section 0.402A of the Ethics Code. Section 0.402A requires Blue Cross and Blue Shield to disclose conflicts of interest with Councilmember Martinez when it appeared before City Council. Specifically, because it failed to disclose that Councilmember Martinez was an in-network physician within Blue Cross's network of physicians. Facts which reasonably understood would have raised a question as to whether Councilmember would violate the Ethics Code, Section 2.01, regarding improper conflicts of interest by participating in the council meeting where the council voted on the contract to Blue Cross Blue Shield. So basically, Councilmember Martinez was supposed to disclose the fact that he may have a contractual relationship with Blue Cross, but so does Blue Cross. Blue Cross independently has to disclose the fact that Councilmember Martinez was an in-network physician. Section 0.402B requires Blue Cross and Blue Shield to disclose its relationship with Councilmember Martinez, specifically on a form that's provided by the city. We'll look at that form as the presentation goes forward. Blue Cross Blue Shield failed to properly comply with Section 0.402B of the Ethics Code because while it admittedly did provide Councilmember Martinez's name in a directory of its in-network physicians in its contract proposal, it failed to properly identify Councilmember Martinez in the disclosure forms that are provided by the city. And those disclosure forms are required to be filled out by any party that is intending to contract with the city. As to ruling number 3, Councilmember Algelt was identified as the source of the public disclosure. And there are laws protecting the dissemination information regarding protection of sources, but there is specifically sections of the code that require the disclosure of those facts. Just some background facts. If we look back at the procurement process, the Laredo Medical Plan Benefit Services was a contract that was put out for bid by the city of Laredo. The procurement process of the Laredo Medical Plan Benefit of Services included self-funded medical plan, medical provider networks, pharmacy benefit plan administration, stop-loss insurance, administration of COBRA, Section 125 plan administration, and Medicare supplement carrier. So when the city put out this to bid, it was a very large contract that covered these areas of services that were put out to bid. The complete package was to cover all of the city's employees, which at any one time exceeds over 2,000 employees. The contract is worth over $26 million, so you get a sense of the breadth of the size of the contract. 5 companies bid for various parts of the insurance contract, those different parts that I showed you. But only 2 companies offered what we call bundle packages, and that was Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Aetna. The city staff recommended Aetna. The award eventually went to Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So the question that arose in ruling number 2 was whether or not Blue Cross and Blue Shield violated section 0.402. Section 0.402 reads as follows. It says disclosures during appearances. A person appearing before a city board or other city body shall disclose to it any known facts which reasonably understood raise a question as to whether any member of the board or body would violate section 2.01, the conflicts of interest section, by participating in official action relating to a matter pending before the board or body. The disclosure is also required to be in proposals. Any individual or business entity seeking a discretionary contract or purchase order with the city shall disclose on a form provided by the city any known facts which, reasonably understood, raise a question as to whether any city official would violate the conflict of interest section by participating in official action relating to any contract. And as you recall, we went over section 2.01, the conflict of interest section, which reads as follows: to avoid the appearance and or risk of impropriety, an official or employee shall not take any action that he or she knows is likely to affect the economic interests of the official or employee, a business entity in which the official or employee knows is an affiliated business or partner of a business entity in which any of the persons listed in section A1 or A2 holds an economic interest, or a business entity or nonprofit entity for which the city official or employee serves as an official or director. And as you know, when we talk about whether or not a member of the city council is considered an official, under section 0.1002, he is. So Council Member Martinez falls under that provision. Economic interest, as we discussed previously, is defined pretty broadly. It includes intangibles and contractual rights having more than a de minimis value. So what does this mean? What this means is that Blue Cross and Blue Shield would have to disclose any relationship that it had with any official that had an economic interest in the contract that is being considered. So we look at the definition of economic interest. It's clear that it's pretty low. It's a de minimis value. It's clear that one of the in-network members of the Blue Cross Blue Shield network of physicians was Councilmember Martinez. Therefore, I think it means the burden that Blue Cross and Blue Shield was under a legal obligation to disclose that relationship with Councilmember Martinez. So does Aetna, by the way. Aetna would have had the same requirement. Councilmember Martinez is also an in-network physician for Aetna. So the same would apply to Aetna. But since we were discussing Blue Cross and Blue Shield, this is what I focused on. There's another provision that is very important. And the reason why I put it is not because it is in our ethics code, but because I think that this goes to the extent at which some of these large companies, especially outside vendors, especially somebody of the level of sophistication as Blue Cross, should know better. And the reason I put this section of the local government code is because even if there could be any comment by Blue Cross and Blue Shield that says, look, we were not familiarized that well with your ethics code, something which they should. Chapter 176 of the Texas Local Government Code, which is a state statute, has a very similar requirement. It's almost verbatim as to what our ethics code provides. And it basically says that a vendor has to file a completed conflict of interest questionnaire if the vendor has a business relationship with a local government entity and an employment or other business relationship with the local government officer. So you see the similarities between both of those. And so in reading those sections, it is certainly my opinion that Blue Cross and Blue Shield should have made that disclosure known in the presentation of its bid. Now, Blue Cross and Blue Shield did give, and they tell us that they gave a list of the in-network physicians in a directory when they filed their bid as part of that procurement process. So when I reached out to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and I discussed with them the issue that you wanted me to look into, they sent me a letter. We'll go over that letter in a little bit. And they say, look, we did disclose the fact that Councilmember Martinez was in our in-network of physicians. But this was a directory. So you'd have to look into the entirety of their procurement package and then look at the directory of their in-network physicians. And that's where they say they disclosed them. So not really what's required by our ethics code, but that was their response. The other thing they mentioned was that the information about their in-network physicians is available online. It is, with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, is accessible to the public in general. And I was able to find that information back when we did the initial report. And so here's where I want to switch over and show you a couple of the exhibits that I think get into what Blue Cross was supposed to show us. So this is Exhibit 1 of the report. This was the actual response that was provided by Blue Cross Blue Shield in their procurement package, part of their package. Okay. And this is a form that's used by the City of Laredo when it's given to outside vendors to provide bids for contracts. And so I've highlighted some sections that are significant. This again is something that Blue Cross and Blue Shield should have read, and the requirements that are provided by the city. So the first part is the bid attributes. And the city specifically says that vendors are advised that the city contracts are subject to all legal requirements provided for in the city charter and or applicable city ordinances, state and federal statutes. The package goes on, the form that's provided by the city, and says the vendor shall bear the burden of proof of compliance with the City of Laredo specifications in their bid contracts. The contract requirements of Section 4 says the Code of Ethics Ordinance is applicable, and vendors doing business with the City of Laredo shall comply with all provisions of the City of Laredo's codes of ethics. So right there, they're telling you, even if you don't know what our code is, all of your bids shall be subject to our code of ethics. And the form used by the city specifically says that you have to fill out a non-collusive affidavit, which has to be filled out and submitted. There's a contract disclosure forms also attached where the city requires the conflict of interest questionnaire to be filled out, and non-collusive affidavit, and a certificate of interested parties. The form contract by the City of Laredo goes on to say that Texas Ethics Commission Form 1295, which is also attached, has a certificate of interested parties. And it goes on to read, in an effort to comply with state law, the certificate of interest parties must be filled out once a vendor has been granted a contract as a separate requirement. This was also not done by Blue Cross, by the way. In 2015, the Texas legislature adopted House Bill 1295, which added Section 2252.908 of the Government Code. The law states that a governmental entity or state agency may not enter into certain contracts with a business entity unless the business entity submits a disclosure of interested parties to the governmental entity or state agency at the time the business entity submits the signed contract. So this was a separate provision, a separate section that was not complied with by Blue Cross and Blue Shield. The conflict of interest disclosure form says a form disclosing potential conflicts of interest involving counties, cities, and other local government entities may be required to be filled out by the vendors or potential vendors. This is the conflict of interest questionnaire form. And basically you have to test that there is no conflict of interest with any interested party. The Blue Cross and Blue Shield also had to fill out a disclosure of conflict of interest, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield certified that they were not aware of any conflicts of interest, stating that there was no applicable disclosure of any conflict that they had to give the city. Same with Chapter 176 of the Local Government Code that we discussed. They acknowledged that they had been advised of the necessity to fill out that form. Blue Cross and Blue Shield swore under oath that all the information that they were providing was true and correct. Okay. So I think from just a review of the of Exhibit 1 to the presentation, you see where the City of Laredo is very careful in disclosing and requiring all outside vendors to disclose any conflict of interest that may arise. They put them on notice that the Laredo Code of Ethics applies. Blue Cross and Blue Shield certified that there was no conflict of interest. And here's the actual questionnaire that was submitted by Blue Cross and Blue Shield, signed here on March 15, 2019 by Trey Smith on behalf of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And again, I just reiterate that there was no mention of any officer or any government official in which they thought that there was a conflict of interest. Okay. With regard to the second finding, the second ruling, the issue that we have for the commission on that, and I go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Was whether or not there was a disclosure to the public before there was any report to the commission about the report, specifically that Councilmember Martinez may have made an improper non-disclosure and voted in a contract in which he may have an economic interest. And so what I was able to find was, bear with me, the investigation showed back on February 17th, this was right before the ethics report was filed. This was a text message from Council member Algill to city officials that he says is as follows. Below is a post from our Laredo on the ethics complaint. He says, I did not give permission for my name to be on this. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. This was a response to council members Algill's posting of the ethics complaint in our Laredo in Facebook. And the city official tells Councilmember Algill that she did not give permission for her name to be on the document. And this was the ethics violation report image that was put on the Facebook page of our Laredo. Okay. And you can see this was the actual snapshot that was put on the Facebook page of our Laredo, which is like an online publication. And this is a version of the report. And this was an earlier version. This was not the one that was actually filed, because in this particular report, you'll see that this says reported by Mayor Pete Sines, Councilmember George Algill, Councilmember Nelly Vilma, and it also mentions Council City Manager Rosario Cabello and HR Director Melina Bermudez. And so what the city official is telling Councilmember Algill is that they didn't authorize or give permission for their name to be used on the report, much less to have it published in social media. And Mr. Algill's reports, I'm on it. Subsequently, this particular report was removed from the Facebook page for our Laredo. And in the final draft of the actual ethics violation report that was filed, you'll see from our filings that the city officials were removed. So the only persons that were reporting the ethics violation was the mayor and council members Al Gilt and Vilma. And so I looked into whether or not, I talked to some folks with our Laredo, and they obviously said that they did not have this posted, that they were not showing this to the public. But I think we can gather from it that the original post came from Mr. Algilt.
How did they get it in the first place?
I'm sorry?
How did they get this in the first place?
I believe from Mr. Algilt.
Okay.
And was it ever posted for the public to see on their Our Laredo Facebook page and then subsequently taken down?
I'm sorry, sir?
Was it on the Our Laredo Facebook page and then subsequently taken down once notified?
Yes, sir. I did not find it. I went back and it had been removed. But the city official that reported this had seen it on Facebook. That's how they became apprised that their name was included in the report.
Councilor, were you aware that Facebook has a section in the back end of the Our Laredo page, or anybody's page for that matter, that has a audit history of everything that's ever been done on that page? And subsequently, you could have seen that post and then seen when it was removed. That's something that I do on a regular basis. I manage about 32 pages for multiple clients, and I do know that at the back end of a page, you can go in there and see, if you are an administrator, you can see if that post had ever been put on and then that it was subsequently removed. It may not show you the post itself, but it will show you an activity log. That's something that Facebook does have the ability to track. And that, again, something that you could have requested or may be able to request from Our Laredo is a copy of their activity log from the back end of their Facebook page.
I think that they have acknowledged the fact that they did post this and and then removed it after, I guess it was called to their attention. I mean, is that right, Mr. Rodriguez? I mean, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sir. And like I said, the evidence that we had that it had been is because that's how the city official saw the report. And so she's like grabbing this from the Facebook page and saying, hey, I didn't authorize my name to be on this report. That's where she got it. And so from interviewing her, I know that it was on their Facebook page. That's where she found it. And so that led to this comment directly to the city officials and Mr. Algilt saying, this is a post from Our Laredo on the ethics complaint. I did not give a permission for my name to be on this document. And subsequent to that, that's when it was removed. And
so, Mr. Chair, at the very least, we have at least a witness statement that says that they saw it on the Our Laredo page. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And Councilor, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask the Councilor, do you have any information that they went anywhere else with it? Maybe Laredo Morning Times or KGNS? Was it produced anywhere else? Was it submitted to another entity besides them that we have that could have resulted in a violation of sorts? Is this the only place where it was shown?
Yes, and in the course of the investigation, I did talk to Mr. Algilt, and but no, I know that he went to KGNS at some point subsequent to this, and he was interviewed there, but I was never able to find directly that or indirectly that this was given to any other media. But I will tell you that talking to several of the persons with knowledge later on, it was apparent that many people knew about the issue with Councilmember Martinez, but I couldn't find anywhere else where this might have been an issue.
And we have no clue if this was reposted or anything beyond that.
I don't, sir. I don't.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah, because we only have what Our Laredo has actually posted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to mention one other exhibit, and let me see if I can reshare here. This is the, can everybody see this?
Yes.
This is, and we can discuss sort of what transpires with those two rulings in the course of the investigation, but this is what causes me a little bit of concern with regard to the law of agency. And what I want to talk to you about is, in law, you have agency, which is basically when a third party can act on behalf of a principal and has a legal authority to bind the principal, okay? This was the response letter that I received from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas when I made an inquiry and I asked them several questions about their knowledge about Dr. Martinez being an in-network physician and their obligations to notify the city. And these were 5 questions that I asked of Blue Cross. Did Blue Cross and Blue Shield know that Councilmember Marta Martinez was an in-network provider for you when you submitted the bid proposal to the city of Laredo? Did Blue Cross and Blue Shield give the city of Laredo notice that Councilmember Martinez was an in-network provider? If it did, how did it provide notice and to whom? Did Blue Cross and Blue Shield provide notice to any third party that Dr. Martinez was a network provider, like, for example, Laurel Insurance? What is the relationship between Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Laurel Insurance? And I understand that Laurel Insurance was acting as an agent for Blue Cross and Blue Shield in assisting Blue Cross and Blue Shield and other insurance companies in the procurement process. That's what I understood from my investigation. And so that's why I put this question in. At the time, I was interested in saying, well, okay, maybe Blue Cross and Blue Shield was hoping that Laurel Insurance would make that disclosure, or that Laurel Insurance would notify the city. That's where I was kind of going with this question. And the 5th question was, did Blue Cross and Blue Shield know that as a city entity seeking business with the city of Laredo, or as an entity seeking business with the city of Laredo, it had to disclose prior to the June 10th, 2019 City Council meeting that Councilmember Martinez was an independent contractor as an in-network physician. And in the response to my questions, Blue Cross and Blue Shield says as follows: as part of the bidding process and prior to award, information showing Dr. Martinez's status as an in-network provider was provided to the city's consultant, Randy McGraw of Hub International. A review of the file provided to McGraw in March 2019 by Blue Cross and Blue Shield at the request of the city indicates the inclusion of Dr. Martinez in the searchable files that listed all network providers. So they're saying we did provide notice that Dr. Martinez was an in-network provider. It was in our directory. In addition, we believe that Dr. Martinez's status as a network provider with Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, and other administrators is also public information readily available. And that's what we're saying. They're saying, hey, it's online. You, City of Laredo, are under a duty to go look for it, look at our website, look at our search engines to see if your council member is in a network. It says the city's procurement team could easily query provider finder tools if its members had concerns or questions about the identity of a network provider or providers in network or out of network status. Finally, as a well-known local physician, it was reasonable to assume that Dr. Martinez's provider status was widely available to city procurement staff, especially as Blue Cross and Blue Shield is the legacy provider of administrative services for the city of Laredo's self-funded group medical benefit plan. So basically they're saying, you should have known, it's common knowledge. Despite the fact that they were supposed to make those disclosures in the form, despite the fact that they swore in those disclosure forms that there was no conflict of interest. This is, I wanted to kind of go over, because they kind of go on to the discussion, but my concern was more with their response as to Laurel, and it's here in this paragraph. Dr. Martinez's status as an in-network or out-of-network provider was not discussed or raised by any person involved in the City of Laredo medical benefit administrative procurement process. Again, switching the burden, putting it on the City of Laredo. Nor was it raised by Laurel Agency. Laurel Agency is the agent, colloquially referenced as a broker of record for the city of Laredo. As the city's broker of record, Laurel is recognized as the city's representative in negotiations with Blue Cross for the city's employee benefit programs. The broker is authorized by the city to perform membership transactions on behalf of the city of Laredo employees and collaborate with Blue Cross and Blue Shield account management team in relation to the services provided to the city's employees. Blue Cross does not discuss with Laurel Agency's Dr. Martinez's status as a network provider. This paragraph is very important, and I think this is where, for future reference, the city should be careful. When an outside person believes that a particular individual is acting as someone's agent, and they're not, then the city needs to correct that. So whether they have a misconception of the relationship between the city and Laurel Insurance is one thing, but I think it's incumbent that that perception be corrected, because they're putting, once they tell the city that Laurel Agency is acting as an agent for the city, if Laurel Agency does something that the city of Laredo is not aware of, Blue Cross and Blue Shield says, I thought he was your agent and he was acting on behalf of the city. It's incumbent on the principal, in this regard, the city of Laredo, to correct that misconception. And so I was a little bit concerned when they said that, because this surprised me. I was always under the impression that Laurel Agency was helping various insurance companies in the procurement process, but they were representing those insurance companies. They were acting as an agent of the insurance companies in the procurement process. Blue Cross and Blue Shield is turning this around and saying, hey, Laurel is your agent. They're acting on behalf of the city of Laredo. And so I think that needs to be, at least corrected or looked at, because that's not necessarily, I think, factually correct. And I don't know that the city wants to be bound by Laurel Agency's acts or omissions with regard to any contract. But that's something for you all to consider. I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was fairly significant. Does anybody have any questions with regard to
Mr. Chairman, if I may, then the question becomes: is Laurel an agent for the city, or was it not an agent for the city? What is at the end of the day, what was the actual relationship between Laurel and the city, and Laurel and Blue Cross Blue Shield? Who were they acting as an agent
on behalf of?
Yeah, on behalf of, exactly.
Yeah. When I talked to Mr. McGraw of Hub International, which was the city's outside representative in helping the city with the procurement process of the contract, he was very specific in saying, look, we were doing this in-house. We weren't working with any agencies. Mr. McGraw was employed for that purpose. Laurel, as an insurance broker, was assisting other insurance companies. Of those bidders, including Blue Cross and Blue Shield and some of the other ones, they were assisting those companies with providing the city with the procurement information. As a matter of fact, there was some discussion during that board meeting in June of 2019 when they were considering the contract, that it became clear that Laurel Insurance was not allowed to participate during the city's deliberations about the different bids, because the city officials thought that would be creating a conflict if Laurel was involved in those discussions, because they could, not that they would, but they could disclose that information to these insurance companies. So at least from the city's perspective, Laurel was not acting as an agent for the city. They had hired Hub International to assist them with the procurement process. And Laurel and that's why I was really surprised with Blue Cross's response, because at least from what I had found from talking to city officials and Mr. McGraw, Laurel was acting as an agent, as a broker for these insurance companies. And the reason it helps the insurance companies is because having a local broker, then that broker can work with assisting the city if there's any claims, adjusting those claims, and so on and so forth. So I was really taken aback by that response from Blue Cross. I was really surprised that they would then turn around and try to make the Laurel an agent of the city.
And Laurel may be an agent, but they're an agent for Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Yes.
If anything, they're just providing an option for the city as a broker and say, hey, you can use Blue Cross or Blue Shield, or you can use this other company or this other company or this other company that may provide a bid for you guys. But at the end of the day, the procurement department is the one that makes the decision based off of the bids that are provided to them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, one of the selling features that Blue Cross presented to the city was you're going to have a local agent, Laurel Insurance, that's there to assist you if you have any problems with any claims. So they were at the time of the bidding process, they were saying Laurel is helping you through. It's going to help us and you because they're our agent in that process, and so they use that as a selling feature of their package. Where Aetna was saying we don't have anybody local, but we have a nurse that can help you and help in the claim process, so your city employees don't have to worry about that. And so it's a very interesting turn of how they present Laurel, but I think it needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, so then would it be safe to assume that McGraw was acting as the city's agent since they were hired by the city?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that assessment. There was they were acting as outside provider to assist the city in the procurement process. Because you saw the scope of the contract, right? It's a massive contract, and it gets very technical. It gets very technical when you start looking at the benefits of each plan, what it covers, what it doesn't cover. It's a very detailed process, and you have to have those experts to be able to make a distinction between one bid and another bid in being to able to discern the differences between both and make an informed opinion as to which one's better. And that was the process, or that was the purpose of hiring Hub International. And they were acting as a city's agent in reviewing, gathering those bids, and then reviewing and helping the city make the decision.
And would Hub International had any responsibility in disclosing a potential conflict? Would they have been in the position that Blue Cross Blue Shield is claiming Laurel is in? In other words, if they were acting as an agent for the city, they should have known that Dr. Martinez was an in-network provider.
Yeah, and that's what Blue Cross and Blue Shield is saying, obviously, but the difference is that Hub International is not making the bid, right? The one that's making the bid is Blue Cross. When I did talk to Mr. McGraw about that, he said, yeah, I saw that his name was in the directory, but again, it's not his duty, right? Contractually, the one that has the duty is the one who's bidding.
Correct.
And so, yeah, interesting. You know, I can see where Blue Cross, this is kind of like their defense, like saying, hey, look, we did provide you notice. Unfortunately, it doesn't meet the specific requirements of the ethics code and the disclosure forms that the city of Laredo has. You know? But like I said, in all fairness, Aetna didn't either. You know, we went back and looked at Aetna's bid proposal, and they didn't either. I just, you know, these are large companies. These are sophisticated companies. I think it's, you know, the city's giving them the forms that says you need to make the disclosure. I just think that they should be more careful, obviously, in doing that. You know.
Is it the responsibility of the bidder, in this case being Aetna, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, or whichever other insurance company out there, to go out and investigate who are each and every councilman that could be on there, who is every employee that's out there that works for the city, and, you know, be able to figure out, like, well, yes, I am in violation, or no, I'm not in violation. I mean, you know, like you say, these are big companies that are going after a bid, but at the same time, you know, I mean, how specific do they have to get, or what is the proper procedure? Because, I mean, they're following the guidelines that are provided to them on the bid, and to their knowledge, as it states there, we are not in violation of these things. But again, you know, I'm not sure how deep in detail one should get when, or, you know, one of these companies should get when they're bidding this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tough burden to put, but it's clearly stated on there. And I think the distinction with council members is that they're the persons that are going to be voting on the contract, right? So I think that's a little, it's a direct relationship at that point. It's not like it's a city employee that maybe works at the health department, that's a physician, but doesn't have the decision on whether to award the bid or not, right? So let's say we have a doctor that works with the health department as a consultant, and that doctor is an in-network physician for Blue Cross, but that physician doesn't have the vote. It can't decide whether the contract is awarded to Blue Cross or to Aetna. I think at the very least, they should look at, well, it's a procurement process, it's a bidding process. Is there a council member that's in network? Because they have to make that disclosure. I think they're put on notice. They're put on notice that they have to make that disclosure. So yeah, I think it's a burden, but at least see if a council member is on there.
So then at the end of the day is, I mean, I guess when this was put up to vote, should there have been something that Mr. Martinez should have done instead of this? Like maybe recluse himself from voting on this? Or
I believe so. I believe so that would have been, we discussed that at the June meeting, about Councilmember Martinez, of whether or not he had done it. The first one is whether or not he should have recused himself. The second part of the analysis that we looked into was whether he had done it knowingly. And that's where the commission found, I think rightfully so, that there really wasn't, the fact that he participated, the fact that he disclosed, yeah, I'm a doctor and I know about this. I think he freely and openly was trying to do the right thing, at least, that's the way I viewed it. But I think that he should have recused him. So he should have voted on it. I think that's the right response on that.
Well, do you know what the final vote for the award of this bid was?
I believe everybody voted in favor. I don't know that anybody abstained. I don't have that. I don't recall exactly, but it did pass, obviously. And I think it was all in favor. I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. So that, I think that was the issue that really stuck out to me was that letter from Blue Cross, because I think that creates potential problems for the city. Ethically, what to do, I mean, I think that's something that the commission certainly can discuss. Council member Al Gilt is no longer a board member. A council member. I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions, any other concerns?
Mr. Chairman, what regarding the second item, which is the disclosure issue, were there any policies or rules, laws broken with that disclosure? Did any one of those three members who were named in the complaint violate any section of the ethics code or government code, or did they inadvertently disclose potential HIPAA information by making those disclosures? Did they use their position to do so? What in essence is the complaint, and where does it fall? What triggers that complaint?
Right. Let me see. So let me see if I can share the screen for you. So section 2.02 and section 2.04 come into play when it discusses, or in discussion, I guess it's significant for our purposes of our discussion, right? So the general rule is that a city official or employee shall not use his or her official position to unfairly advance or impede private interests, or to grant or secure or attempt to grant or secure for any person, including himself or herself, any form of special consideration, treatment, exemption, or advantage beyond that which is lawfully available to other persons. Special rules that apply, reciprocal favors. A city official or employee may not enter into an agreement or understanding with any other person wherein any official action or inaction by the official or employee will be rewarded or reciprocated by the other person directly or indirectly. Section 2.04, improper access. A city official or employee shall not use his or her position to obtain official information about any person or entity for any purpose other than the performance of official duties. And it goes on to discuss improper access or use. A city official or employee shall not intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly disclose any information gained by reason of said official or employee's position concerning the property, records, operations, policies, or affairs of the city, including those items discussed in closed or executive session. So these are the two provisions that specifically may be applicable. Was whether or not, Councilmember Algelt was unfairly advancing any interest by posting this, or at least disclosing it to our Laredo. And was he using the fact that as a city official, he had access to this report, had access to the information, and then use that intentionally or knowingly to disclose that information? So, he wouldn't have had information if he were a private citizen. He had access to this information as a city official. So those are the two sections of the ethics code that are applicable.
And it is your opinion that he violated section 2.4 in the improper access, and not necessarily the general rules or special rules, but in the improper access?
That's a very good question, because I think you're making a very fine distinction. And yes, I think that's of the two. I think that's really where we get into that he obviously had access to information as a city official. And I think that he obviously intentionally, knowingly disclosed it to our Laredo. The first section, 2.02, I think you rightfully make a distinction in showing that, was he advancing his position politically? That would necessitate further an in-depth investigation, right? Whether he was getting any type of special favors, I don't know. I think the point is that he had access to information and he disclosed that information. And the access that he had, the information that he had, was specifically because of his position. So it's your belief that the other two members that are mentioned in the complaint, Mayor Sines and former council member Vielma, were not participants in this? That's correct.
And that Algelt solely and only did, it was just his actions that led to the improper access and the improper use of that information, intentionally, knowingly, and potentially recklessly. Obviously, the physician named, right, Dr. Martinez, is a specific, has a specific practice, and he disclosed certain relationships that could have potentially violated HIPAA because he has a special treatment.
And if I may just interject, I know this is Mr. Tamez's report and his investigation. I just as part of the ethics issue, this is not going to be an evidentiary hearing for you gentlemen. It's only a report, and ultimately all findings and conclusions are ultimately going to be the commission's. And Mr. Tamez, I don't mean to interject at that point.
No, that's fine.
Agreed. And I was just asking for opinion, not necessarily for anything more than that, Counselor. And I appreciate you stepping in and saying that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's the only questions that I had.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner Benmatis. Yeah, and like I said, those are very good questions, because I think you're making a very fine distinction on these two sections. So I think you rightfully pointed out that distinction. So commissioners, that concludes the report, and I'm certainly available for any other questions that you may have.
Let me ask you, are there any other okay, I'm sorry. Let me ask you, are there any other, like I say, other providers that Mr. Martinez was a provider for? Or in that sense, like, was he also was he also a physician for Aetna who was also bidding this and others that were bidding it?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, I think that's why it's fair also to mention that Aetna didn't disclose. We did look at the contract that Aetna had bid their package, and they didn't disclose that that Councilmember Martinez was an in-network physician either. So it seems like we have, it's not just Blue Cross. It seems like this is a problem that's transcending these insurance providers. I will point out that when I tried to look at Aetna's directory online, it wouldn't let me. That one is not open to the public. At this point, I don't recall if they provided a directory like Blue Cross, but we do know from talking to Councilmember Martinez that he is also an in-network provider. And that was his argument. His argument was, look, basically today, doctors, this is the way they practice. I agree. I think that they do, but there is a quid pro quo. There is a benefit both to the insurance company and to the doctor to be in network, because they're benefiting from the advertising. They're getting, we're talking about a group of over 2,000 potential patients, and they're listed in their directory. They're going to be sent directly to this doctor, and the doctor charges a lesser amount, right? I mean, that's why it's a benefit to the employee, it's a benefit to the insurance company, and it's a benefit to the doctor. But yes, sir, at least with Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Aetna, Dr. Martinez was a provider, in-network provider, and Aetna did not make the disclosure, just like Blue Cross failed to do.
Mr. Tamez, Adolfo Martinez here. Did you show us a directory there and what type of physicians come out in that directory? And in other words, are there more than one specialty in each, or is it just a general list of doctors, or do they mention their specialty in that list? Yes, sir. Yes, they do. I don't have the directory for you, but if you want to see it, I can provide it to you later. But when I looked at the directory that was online, they go by location and then specialty. So if there's a pain management doctor, they will list the pain management physicians that are in network. And I believe that there's 2 or 3 that appear in Blue Cross. So I believe Dr. Martinez is not the only specialist for pain management in Laredo. Okay. Yeah, and the burden here on what the definition of economic interest is, what's, what you had mentioned, what was that? Can you go back to that? I just want to make sure I got the exact definition for that. Yes, sir. Let me go ahead and share the screen. I pulled it up to that slide, so it'll be easier to find it. Can you all see this? Yes. Okay. So I put it as kind of like a footnote because it does in the general rule mention the term economic interest, and economic interest is defined in section 2.01A17, 1.8, I believe. Economic interest is defined to include, but not limited to, intangibles and contractual rights having more than a de minimis value. So it's a very low threshold as to what an economic interest is. And certainly there's a contractual right because there's an agreement between a Blue Cross and the physician that they're going to be a network and there's benefits that are exchanged between the parties. And de minimis value, I think it doesn't, de minimis, basically it's a very low threshold. It doesn't mean that you have to get $1,000 a month in services or as a result of the contract. It's just bare minimum, right? So kind of a low threshold. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, there you are.
Hey, sorry about that. Okay, so I think at this point, do we have any other questions by any of the members of the commission?
I do have one other question for our legal staff. for our city attorney, Mr. Benavides. Is the issue with the requirements for the bidders that Councilor Tames alluded to sufficiently spelled out for those who are acting in similar bids like that with a potential broker in the middle and a consultant for the city also across, in that who bears a responsibility for disclosing these things? I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I submitted bids before, not as a previous council member, have reviewed those as well, and would know that, you know, forms 1295 and the collusion, the affidavit collusion should have been filled out. The notice of, or conflict of interest disclosure should have been filled out. And that there's also mechanisms beyond that. Once it is, a conflict is discovered, I think the chairman pointed out a really important point, that it's really hard to police when you have thousands of employees and these entities don't necessarily know who has what role, where, and create a conflict. Conflict is disclosed or discovered, that there's a mechanism to file the appropriate paperwork. Is that a matter of training for these vendors that maybe we're not giving them?
And I'm going to answer this, Mr. Benmanis or Commissioner Benmanis. Is that I know that it's a legal question, but it's pertaining to the investigation at hand, and so I'm going to refer all legal questions and matters pertaining to this particular issue to Mr. Tames, since he is the person appointed for this particular issue. Procedurally, what I'll tell you is that once you've heard the report, the attorney will be able to, right now, explain any legal questions if you have, as far as pertaining to the violations that are alleged and how the law exists pertaining to those violations, so that way you can determine if you want to move forward with an evidentiary hearing at a later time. And that's procedurally what will occur. So the attorney, Mr. Tames, in this instance, will answer any of those legal questions. I'll answer any questions you have about the procedures here. But as far as legalities of what would consider violations or ethical issues, I'm going to refer to Mr. Tames.
Then the same question is asked. Is this potential violation a product of lack of training for vendors when you have multiple situations like that you have brokers and consultants, and whose responsibility to disclose may not be clear?
Yeah, a good question. Certainly we're talking with Mr. McGraw. I think he puts that duty, that obligation on the outside vendor, right? At what point did are you saying, did Mr. McGraw have a duty? Well, not pursuant to our ethics code. I think city officials later on knew, obviously, that he was in network. When you have such a large contract with a large insurance company who has been a provider for the city in the past, I think the communication should be there, and I think it should be pointed out, specifically in this instance, because they're kind of changing that agency relationship and making Laurel an agent of the city. We have to correct that. But and I don't know what the city does, Mr. Belmatis, with regard to communications with bidders, in telling them, hey guys, be aware, this is our ethics code, these are the forms that you need to fill out, please be careful. Certainly, like I said, sophisticated party. This Blue Cross has an in-house lawyer, and they even hired a local lawyer. So in this matter, so they know how to read. They certainly know the rules. In that particular instance, I think there really isn't a lot that we can take it and say, it was a mistake. It's there. I don't know how much more clear it can be. But as far as the city procedure and, with city officials with dealing with smaller companies, you bring up a good point, because a smaller company may not have access to that. This may not be something they do on a frequent basis. So, does the city provide, some kind of training or some kind of, process that I am not aware of. I must admit. but that would not be a bad thing to do, but to avoid those specific instances, like you said. Smaller companies may not. They may not know. I mean, the difference between an economic interest. I mean, you saw the definition. I mean, it's not it's not an easy thing to sift through, right? So an individual who's never had any legal experience in their lives may unwittingly not make a disclosure. And in that case, I think you need to treat that on a case-by-case basis. It's different, I think, when you've got a company that has an in-house legal department. They do these bids on a regular basis. They deal with these issues on a frequent basis. That's a little bit different.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, if is there any other comments that need to be made for anyone else?
Just real quickly, Vidal.
Yes,
Francisco, you mentioned 2 of the 5 insurance companies had that same situation with that council member. We don't know what happened with the other 3, right? In other words, we just know that we know in Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield, they didn't disclose that. We don't know if the other insurance companies also had that problem. And it's because I see what Gene is saying. It looks like we might have a problem here that's going broad in scope that maybe we do have to address, because it wasn't just one making a mistake. It's independent parties here, both make it. Well, then maybe there's a failure to communicate, or somehow we need to tighten that string a little bit more.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and if the 2 that did a package bundle for services were those 2, and that package of bundle included the health insurance provision for the city employees. So those were the ones that specifically fell into the realm of Councilmember Martinez. The other insurance companies, if I remember correctly, had to do with death benefits. There was a death benefit provision. There were several other insurances that were independent. And so he may have not obviously been an in-network provider for, a health company that deals with death benefits. If one of the city employees passes away, there's death benefits that may, So I think the only 2 that specifically dealt with the health insurance package of it were Aetna and Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Got you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, so Mr. Thomas, the others were ancillary products, some type of Aflac
Right.
or something along those lines, or cancer policies.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good.
Yeah, there was like a disfigurement, dismemberment. There was retirement benefits, the death benefits. So there were different areas that encompass the coverage that the city provides. That's correct.
Okay. Well, I think these are the only 2 items on the agenda tonight. So are there some things that we need to discuss? I think there's some things that we need to discuss in executive session. And so that way we can come back with.
What are the issues, Commissioner Cantu, that you need to discuss on executive
Well,
session?
we need to. Are we gonna propose an evidentiary hearing to see if, in fact, Blue Cross and Blue Shield was in violation of these codes, and also if from the presentation, if ex-Councilman Elgett was in violation of 2.04 from the ethics code. Or is that something we can discuss right now? I mean, we don't even have to go out there if we don't have to.
Yes, Commissioner Cantu. You don't have to go to executive session to discuss that procedurally.
All right, then let's do it.
Procedurally, you can have discussion as to whether you want to either summarily dismiss the complaints that were made or proceed with an evidentiary hearing.
All right. Well, what are Well, do we have any members that wish to go forward in any direction?
Commissioner Sabat, I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we hear you there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the hearing and proceed from there.
With the evidentiary hearing,
Yes.
that we will proceed to, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, the evidentiary hearing for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And in my opinion, since Mr. Algot is no longer a councilman, we ought to dismiss that. I don't know if I can get a second on that.
I second that motion for Mr. Zapata.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, discussion. I mean, go ahead, Mr. Belmontes.
A violation is a violation is a violation, whether they are current or not a current members of the council. You know, the Ethics Commission serves to hear complaints about violations of our ethics, regardless whether it's done by an elected official or a former elected official or a private citizen who may have, in his relationship with the city, violated our ethics. And so, I think if we're going to proceed with a evidentiary hearing for both A and B for Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think we ought to proceed with the one for B as well, and then let the evidentiary presentations address both those issues before the commission.
Okay, is that a motion? Well, first of all, we have a motion. We have a motion on the table already and a second, and this is a discussion. I mean, is there?
So what I'm asking is that if we're going to proceed with evidentiary, that we proceed with both, and let the commission hear both cases. And so I would ask that Commissioner Zapata amend his motion and include B as well.
Yeah, the reason I will not amend my motion, Mr. Benitez, is that what if we find Mr. Algot guilty of this? What action are we going to take? You can't do anything to him. He's gone. I mean, we're wasting our time.
But Mr. Chair, I don't believe that's accurate. I think that even though he's not currently serving, that there are fines that could be imposed upon him. There could be training that could be imposed upon him. Counselor, city attorney, he doesn't necessarily have to be an official to be found in violation of the ethics. And so, what do we do with him? Well, what are the possible penalties, Mr. Benavides, that could be imposed on anyone, not necessarily this particular individual?
From what I understand as well, is that this implies to anyone involved, not necessarily just citizens of the city, but also, I mean, more so employees or elected officials or any type of official with the city. Is that correct, or am I wrong about that?
That is correct. And you can consider the actions when he was an official, but this is not only applicable to only.
I'm sorry, this isn't what? I'm sorry?
No. You were correct on that statement. The information is not only for officials, but at the time, you're considering also, though, the issue as to at the time when this person was, that's when the complaint was made. So the same, I guess, avenues or the range of whatever action you're going to take applies to that person as well.
Okay, and I guess would this set a precedence to any other current or outgoing elected officials as well? Is that correct?
That's a fact for you to decide, sir.
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Chairman, if I may.
add to that. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ornelas, go ahead.
Oh, gee, I was just going to go. I see what Mr. Belmontes brought up, and I thought the purpose of the Ethics Commission is to set a standard of conduct, and that conduct applies to all people, employees, people doing business. So even if it goes beyond, and that's not our job. Our job is right now just to make that determination. So I join Mr. Belmontes' comment earlier.
I call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if that's the case, it's you have the motion on the floor, Mr. Zapata. Would you like to continue with your motion as you have presented it, or would you like to amend that in any way?
Let's continue with the way I presented it.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Well, it has been moved and second to continue with an evidentiary hearing towards the investigation of Blue Cross and Blue Shield for violations of Ethics Code 4. I believe it's 02 or 02. And that's the motion that's been brought to the table. It's supposed, and at this time, and to dismiss the violation towards Mr. Algett. So at this point,
if I may, just because I just found out, Mr. Algett is on one of the city boards. Just to let you all know that I just found that information out.
Okay.
And then that goes back to what Commissioner Ornelas mentioned. This should set a standard for all of us that serve on a board. And if he still serves on the board, then there are consequences to that, obviously, and we should be setting that standard. So I don't believe that we should exclude him from an evidentiary hearing.
Okay. Well, since we have this particular motion on the table now, it's the one that we would vote on. And if you would like to bring another motion to the table afterwards, then we can do that as well.
Agreed.
So at this point, again, Mr. Zapata, can you repeat your motion just to verify exactly what we are voting on and what Mr. Martinez has seconded?
You can do it. It's on the record already. I made the motion already. And I ask you to call for a voice vote on this.
All right. So it is on record that Mr. Zapata has requested for us to continue with this evidentiary hearing towards Blue Cross and Blue Shield and to dismiss any hearings towards Mr. Algett in violation of any ethics violations. So now that we've discussed, we'll bring the vote to the table. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And those opposed?
Aye.
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 Okay, so so the motion does not pass.
Mr. Chair, motion to continue evidentiary hearings for both items A and B.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and second to continue with evidentiary hearing on items A and B. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll put it to vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
I abstain.
And abstained. Okay, the motion carries and the evidentiary hearing will proceed for both the violations that may have occurred from Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Mr. Algett for his violations of on Ethics Code 2.04. And I'm sorry, was it? I believe that's right. Is that 2.04 for Mr. Algett and 4.02?
Yes, sir. 4.02A and B for Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Okay.
And
And Mr.
202 and 204 for Mr. Alkeld.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Then we'll continue with our agenda. I believe those are the only items on the agenda. So do we
Motion
have
to adjourn.
do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Carries. Thank you very much.